I'm Lisa Williamson, Executive Director of Our Children Incorporated. In America, we as black people find ourselves in a state of war. And if we are going to be victorious, we have to have an understanding as to who are our friends and who are our enemies. Please, let's not be confused. The black man is not the enemy of the black woman, and the black woman is certainly not the enemy of the black man. Let's come together as we watch this message, which attempts to bring clarity and understanding so that our community can move forward and triumph.
I think we should thank our ancestors and ask them for their blessings. If you agree with what we say here, would you please say Ashe?
Ashe.
We want to thank, starting with the time of the tragedy, we want to thank the Africans who one evening or one morning or one afternoon were taken from their homes and who did not give up, but who searched for an answer. Do you agree?
That's great.
We want to thank those Africans who, in the bellies of thousands of slave ships, beaten, tortured, chained, raped, starved, held on and did not give up, but looked for answers. Do you agree we should thank them and ask for their blessings?
Ashe.
We want to thank those Africans on the plantations in the Caribbean and in the southern states, and in New York City was a slave state too, you know. We want to thank them for holding on, for finding answers, for loving one another when mother had been taken from father, mother had been taken from children, when father had been taken from wife, when grandparents had been set out in the forest just to die, and they held on, did not give up, created a literature that sustained us until this day. They looked for answers. They did not fight. Do we agree?
Ashe.
And after emancipation, after they set us loose, those of us who died, the starved, those of us who searched on the roads, up and down the South, all over this country, looking for loved ones who were put with them during the time of slavery, had to jump over the broom weddings. But when they were set free, they didn't separate. They looked for each other. They didn't give up. Do you agree that we should thank them and ask for their guidance this evening?
Ashe.
For all of those who have gone before, who have paid the price, who did not give up. Sometimes the children in the family did not belong to the father, but that father stayed with the mother. Sometimes the children in that family did not belong to the mother, but that mother stayed with that father. And they brought us to this state. They brought us here to this time. And so we must call on their strength to take us forward, to find a way to stay together as they stayed together. Do you agree?
Ashe.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, sister.
What we're doing today is so very important. We don't have time for this really, because there's a greater enemy out there aiming at us. So that is the big fight. But in order to better ourselves for that fight, to strengthen ourselves for that fight, we have to tighten up. There can be no divisiveness between us. There can be no blaming and taking praise. It doesn't belong with us. It's not traditional. And so today we've come to talk, to tell our story. We haven't told it. After emancipation, we couldn't tell our story. We had to find jobs. We had to support one another. We were building schools, but we didn't heal the wounds of over 400 years of slavery. There was no time for us to talk, to thank one another, or to get out the anger with one another. There was no time. We had to survive. And so it is in us all this time. Maybe today we can talk about some of those things. Maybe today we can let that anger out. Maybe today we can see each other with new eyes. Maybe today, starting from today, we can love in spite of, as our ancestors did. Love above all else. That's what we're going to talk about today. If there's anger, we should hear it. If there's love, we should hear that too. If there's confusion, we need to hear that too. And we have a panel here of magnificent people. Some of them are still on their way. But let us listen to what they have to say, and then we're going to listen to what you have to say. Thank you. Our first sister to speak will be Sister Susan Taylor.
This is so powerful. The fact that we are all here is proof positive of our need and our desire to love and understand each other. And I think that whenever we, the children of survivors living in the African diaspora, whenever we come together to shore up our love, it's a celebration. It's a celebration because for so many hundred years, there have been all kinds of forces arrayed against our love. And here we are, the first generations of Africans in the Americas who are up off of our knees. In many ways, we can say that we are the flowers in bloom. The flowers in bloom because yesterday's black people's dreams were really not for themselves. Their dreams were for their children. And we are those children. And if we're going to take the legacy, that important and powerful legacy that's been handed to us, if we're going to take that legacy and parlay it into a glorious tomorrow, we're going to have to commit to each other. You don't need me to remind you of the negative statistics that point to our pain in this America. We know that while we sit here rather comfortable on 138th Street, that drugs are running roughshod through this very community and throughout our communities all across this country. We know that 1/2 of our children are poor in this nation. We know that in America, the wealthiest country in the world, we have increasing numbers of homeless people, increasing numbers of hungry people, increasing numbers of hopeless people. And we also know that there's a war on black people in America. And it's real difficult to love and resist at the same time. It's real hard to fight a war and love at the same time. And you know, I've come to a new resolve within myself. I'm not going to just point the finger alone at whomever sits in the Oval Office. I'm not going to point that finger alone at politicians and religious leaders and civic leaders. I'm not going to do that. You know who I'm going to point the finger at? At you and me. You and me. The most affluent, educated group of Africans anywhere in the world. That's who we are. And what's so incredible to me is that wherever I travel, just in the last maybe 9 months, I've been in Zimbabwe. I flew off with a team to South Africa when Nelson Mandela was released, went with his daughter Zenani to share time with the family and bring back the story that's in the current issue of Essence. My family is from the Caribbean. I travel throughout the Caribbean. Wherever I go in this world, and I see people of African ancestry, you know who represents their hope for the future? It's us. All around this globe, African people are looking toward African Americans as their hope for building a positive future. They're looking at you and me. So the continuing pain in Black America is not dependent on what happens in the White House. It's not dependent alone on who we elect to represent us on a community level. The continuing pain in Black America is dependent on you and me not getting along. It's dependent on our inertia. It's dependent on you and I standing still. It's dependent on you and I continuing to buy in to that nonsense that Hollywood has taught us. What we have to do is create some new criteria for love. Sister Camille Yarborough said it so plainly. You know, there are people, it's interesting that I'm even speaking about relationships. Even though Essence covers relationships a lot, there is nothing that I personally am more interested in. You know, some people have called me a radical feminist. There are other people who've said that I'm an apologist for black men. I define myself as a truth seeker. A person who's really trying to heal the wounds between us. And sometimes in bearing the truth, you hurt people's feelings and you say things that people rather not deal with. It was Essence that first brought up the color question. It's Essence that really cautions black men to make sure that we don't negate dark-skinned black women. What we've tried to do is really tell the truth. I see myself mainly as a student of history. And when I look to the history and I think about how we loved, as Sister Camille said, in spite of the odds, I know that we have the strength today to heal the wounds between us. I love reading those slave narratives that were done during the 1930s when some of the former slaves were still alive. You know that during slavery, our ancestors were not allowed to marry. Marriage wasn't allowed. But we created our own ritual. We jumped that broom. And we know that when slavery ended, there were no 40 acres. There were no mules. During slavery, the folks said that the harshest punishment they could have been rendered against the slave, it wasn't the whip or the lash. You know what it was? It was separation from the family. When slavery ended, black men and black women roamed through the South. No, we didn't have 40 acres. No, we didn't have mules. We didn't have any money. Most of us didn't have any shoes, tattered garments. Whatever we had, we were carrying. Walking through the South looking for each other. Husbands looking for wives. Wives looking for husbands. Siblings looking for each other. Children looking for parents. African Americans have a long and glorious history of loving and supporting each other. As late as the turn of the century, do you know that 90% of our children were born into two-parent households? In 1970, 75% of children of African ancestry were born into a nuclear family. There's a war on black people. There's a war on black people. And it's the war that's preventing us from coming together in ways that we need to. And what I want to talk a little bit about tonight is the importance of loving and understanding yourself. Because I believe that no matter how hard we may try to heal the wounds between us, if those wounds exist, I don't know about the rest of you, but I love black men. You know, I'm not angry at any black men. In fact, you know, the folks who know my personal history, my mother will say to me, how could you have your ex-husband, your ex-husband come and have dinner with us on Thanksgiving? Not that she doesn't like him, she just doesn't understand how I can relate to him like that, you know? And the people who know what happened in that relationship, I'm home. I was born in this neighborhood. This is my neighborhood. Y'all are family, so I'm going to tell you all the truth, you know. I was in a relationship that was very painful and that was violent. And the people who know about that relationship will always say to me, how could you even entertain having a dialogue with your former husband? You know what I have to remember? Nobody made me marry him. Nobody dragged me down any aisle. Nobody tied me up and said, you must say I do. Nobody threatened me. I chose that person. And what I've learned during the 20 years between that marriage and the new marriage I've just entered into is that it's not about looking for the right person. It's about becoming the right person. With myself, the things that I have blamed men for are the very things that need fixing in me. The very things that need fixing in me. We have got to learn how to love ourselves. We have got to give ourselves permission to love ourselves. We have got to make our own lives our number one priority. And this is particularly hard for women. This is particularly hard for black women to do. You know why? Because we're raised to serve. We're raised to believe that everything and everybody is more important than we are. And while we know that we have a responsibility to our families, to our husbands, to our children, to our lovers, to our community, to our work, there is no greater responsibility than the responsibility we have to ourselves. And it's so often that we hear, and I know you hear it all the time, you black women are so evil. Don't we hear it all the time? And it's not that black women are evil. It's that we are tired. Sisters are tired. Tired. If you look at the work, you know, what we have to do is really empathize with each other. We have to seek to understand what each other's lives are like. Sisters have a long and glorious history of work, a real painful history of work. You think about what black women did in this country. We washed, cooked, cleaned, and ironed for our families, took care of our parents, took care of our grandparents when necessary, our husbands' parents and grandparents. Then went to the other side of town, washed, cooked, cleaned, and ironed for white America, took care of their parents and their children, came back to the black community, baked sweet potato pies to build Abyssinian Baptist Church. What black women have done in America. So I think that maybe I can explain something. Sisters, you know, what sisters are saying to brothers today is that we're just tired. Don't want to be the only one responsible for caring for the children. Don't want to be responsible because of our gender for cleaning the house solely. Don't want to be responsible for the cooking, the cleaning, the washing, the ironing, the taking the kids to, you know, to the hairdresser, to the barber, to all the services that they need in order to look good and grow. We don't want that to be our responsibility because of our gender. And we understand that it shouldn't be the responsibility of our brothers to bring all the income in, that we have to throw away that European concept because it doesn't work for us. We've got to become partners in this. I can't help but just feeling, I'm not even looking at Reg, but I can feel you. This is a brother. Reg, just stand up for a moment, because I want the brothers to see you. This is Reginald Oliver. He is married to the editor of Essence, my partner. Okay? No, I don't think you're my husband. He's married to the woman who really makes my life possible, the person who I work with more closely than anybody on the magazine. This is a brother, Reg, and I hope I don't embarrass you by saying this. This is a brother who is deeply spiritual, who is loving and caring. This is a brother who takes care of all the cooking in the home. This is the brother who allows Stephanie to stay at work until 7 and 8 o'clock at night sometimes, because he knows that what we're doing is trying to build something that's going to put, this is not just a magazine. We're trying to put an underpinning of love and security beneath our people. So Reg doesn't say because Stephanie is a woman, she's got to cook, she's got to clean, she's got to wash, she's got to iron. Reg says the business that I'm doing leaves me closer to home. I have more flexible time than you do. I'm going to take care of business. And he's a man, a whole man. What we have to do is look into each other's hearts. And I say, brothers, look at your mother's lives. We know how hard our mother's lives were. How our mothers washed, cooked, cleaned, and I did all the work without complaining. Well, my mother did a lot of complaining. She let me know that she did not want to do this, but had to do it. Had to do it. You know, I say to my sisters, what we're talking about is understanding. Sisters, don't ever call another black man trifling. Unless you have walked through this America in a brother's shoes, that is not your experience. You don't know what it's about. And if there's a man in your life who is mistreating you, let that brother go. Turn him loose. You know? Don't tear him down. Don't tear him down. Don't call him names. Don't pick up the phone and talk to your girlfriends about how bad he is. Don't put your hand on your hip and your finger in the brother's face. Cut it loose. Cut it loose. You know, the very women, I have really never said this, but this has been stirring in my heart for a long time. The very sisters who I hear say, there are no good men, there are none available, there aren't enough healthy ones to love, have no men. The ones who say that have no men. Because you know one thing I know about life, whatever you believe is so in your life. Whatever you believe, whatever you espouse, whatever you hold on to is what you're going to attract to yourself. My friends said to me a couple of months ago, they said, you know, girlfriend, you always said you wanted to be married again. Well, it was 19 years between marriages. And yes, I am married again, and I hope that I have picked the divine right man. I don't wait for a man to pick me. I pick who I want. I do my own selecting. And I mean, I don't know, because you know what I do know? I know that there are no guarantees, that nothing is, not even the next breath is promised. So I don't know if that relationship is going to be there tonight. I don't know if it's going to be there next year. I don't know if it's going to be there when I'm 70 years old, but I know it's there now. And the brother who I married to, Kefra, is not here tonight. You know why? Because he's in school for me. He's in my class at Fordham University, taking my notes in my biology class. But let me tell you, when people first heard that I was going out with Kefra Burns, a brother who was living in a 2-room apartment in Harlem, a poet, a righteous brother who loves and serves black people, people shook their heads and said, what is Susan Taylor going out with Kefra Burns for? She should be with somebody who's a corporate captain or an ambassador. Everybody knows what's best for you better than you. And you see, if you don't take quiet time, if you don't get to know yourself, if you don't practice loving yourself, you'll believe what other people tell you. I say to sisters all the time, sisters will tell me, you know, I really want a good man, I want a relationship. And I'll say, well, what about so-and-so? And invariably a sister will say, I can't go out with him, he's shorter than me. Oh, I can't go out with him, he's got a bald spot. I can't go out with him, that brother has no money. I can't go out with him because that brother messes up his verbs. Okay. Well, you know what I say? I'll say to the sister, well, I thought you were looking for love. If you're looking for love, you've got to look beyond the accoutrement. You've got to look beyond what that sister looks like. Because we're not going to always be fine, firm, and forever 22. Okay? And you know, brothers, that causes us a great pain as women. It hurts us that you cast us aside when we turn 40 and 50 and 60 and 70 years old. It hurts us. We're not going to always be 25 like Lisa. You know? 44. I'm 44. It's not about looks. You know, I don't look like I did at 25, and this is not how I'm going to look at 70. But you see, when I'm 70 years old, I want to be loved. I want to be held. I want to be made love to. When I'm 70 years old, even when my breasts are as flat as pancakes, I want my brother to take those breasts and hold them and kiss them and rub them. That's what I want my man to do when I'm 70. I want to be loved. without my title. I want to be loved without my salary. I want to be loved without my extensions and without my makeup. I want to be loved. And you know what that means? That means that we have to pick the right life partner. That means that we have to be selective, but that we have to use a new basis for choosing each other. We have to find people, we have to select each other for who we are inside, for the part of us that's going to get better. So if you begin to look to who the person is inside, if you're not concerned with what corporation they work for or the job they don't have, you're not concerned whether or not that person has a car, how they speak. You're concerned with whether or not you and that person can build something together. Because you know what? That's why we're here. We're here to build. And in order to build, what we have to do is use all the oars that we have in the water to pull smartly in the same direction. You and me, brothers and sisters, working together hard. The love that you give yourself is the cake. That's the whole substance. The love that a man or a woman gives you is the icing on the cake. And we have to know that our happiness is not based on relationships. It's not based on money. It's not based on material things. Because those things are here today and gone tomorrow. Our happiness is based on something deeper and more visceral than that. Our personal happiness is based on the personal relationship that we have to God. That power and that force. That power and that force. It's not in Bibles, it's not in crystals, it's not in Korans, it's not in rosary beads or in statues. It's in you. We are human and divine. We are more than what meets the eye. So those times when we have no lover, that's fine. Hug your own selves. Pat your own cheek. Call your own self sweetie pie. So when that lover comes along, you can say, this is how I like it. This is how I like to be held, you know? This is how I like my feet rubbed. Self-love, that's really where it begins. Self-love, the relationship that you build with yourself. And I think that self-love is so deeply connected to quiet time. It's the most important time we must take. It's that time when we press away from the world, when we turn off the cacophony of the world, when we get in touch with that stillness inside. And if you don't do that every day, then you don't know who you are. If you don't do that every day, then all your relationships are in flux. If you don't do that every day, you're out of order. And you know, I write about it, I talk about it, and sometimes it's my last consideration. Because we usually come to God when our world is falling apart. And as soon as that world begins to heal again, we get busy. We forget. We forget to serve. We forget to go within. It's got to become as much a part of our living as breathing is. We've got to make quiet time an important part of our lives. That time when you ask yourselves, do I like my life? Am I loving? Have I attracted negative people to me? Are there people I need to get out of my life? Have I surrounded myself with good people who think I'm wonderful? What kinds of words are coming out of my mouth? Am I calling people negative things? Am I saying negative words? Am I doing positive things? How am I living my life? Where do I want to be 5 years from now? Where do I want to be 10 years from now? Am I healthy? Am I fit? Am I doing what's best for me? When you're loving you, you become a magnet for all good things. We think those things are miracles. Because the money you need appears, the divine right lover appears. All the circumstances that you need in your life appear. They are made manifest. And we think they're miracles. And you know what it is? It's just God being God in you. Thank you.
How many of y'all have ever been to male-female relationships conferences where people just kind of went off? Okay. Well, that's one of the things that I kind of want to address, because when we have our question and answer period later on, there's always the opportunity for that to happen. And we want to make sure it doesn't happen. Ayikwe Ama the author of the novel 2000 Seasons, has said that the destroyed who retain the desire to remake themselves and then act upon that desire remake themselves. I want you to close your eyes right now and try to think of some of the images which Camille and Susan both alluded to. I want you to close your eyes and go back with me on a journey into the past. I want to take you on a journey back first through a time of splendor and then through a time of pain. And I want you to take you from there to the present and then on into the future. On through the future to a victorious tomorrow. Think of a time when African men and women related to each other in predictable, repeatable patterns that spanned generations, spanned millennia. That means thousands of years. Fathers producing sons who would be fathers and grandfathers, men who would maintain a tradition of loving and respecting black women, and black women doing the same thing for their men. Rituals thousands and thousands of years old, designed to take boys and girls through each important step in acquiring the knowledge and skills of being men and women and parents and elders and ancestors. Think of that time and those times where relationships were studied and perfected and immortalized in dance and wood carvings and stone, and where the relationships not only between men and women, but between men and children, between children and plants, between plants and seeds, between seeds and stars, was defined and redefined and refined and balanced and so harmonious that it was said, in fact it was known, that everything is interrelated. Now this is a concept that European physicists are just on the brink of claiming that they have recently discovered. Think of times when there was no such word as drug addict, no such word as welfare cheat or orphanage or jail, no such word as border baby or any of the scores of negative words that are so often applied to African people. Think of Amenhotep III and Queen T. Think of Amhos I and Nefertari. Think of pyramids and temples and universities and carvings immortalizing African man and woman and their relationships. Then think of the images Camille and Susan were just talking about. I want you to think about a slave ship where there wasn't even enough room to either sit or lay down. You were crowded, you were hot, you were cold, you were whatever the temperature, whatever the outside elements brought to you, that's what you were. You were beaten, you were tired, and you were sore. I want you to think of a terrible holocaust of kidnap and murder and mutilation and separation and destruction and devastation and rape and degradation. I want you to think of fathers watching their daughters dragged off. I want you to think of fathers watching their wives dragged off and mothers watching their sons dragged off. Think of the African woman's freedom of choice on a slave ship. And then repeat one more time. The destroyed. Can you repeat that for me? The destroyed. Who retain the desire to remake themselves. And act upon that desire. Remake themselves. Yes, brothers and sisters, there was a Holocaust so bloody, so brutal, so wasteful as to be unimaginable. Even with your eyes closed, you can go ahead and open your eyes now, those of you who had them closed. Even with your eyes closed, you cannot recreate the horror of a slave ship. The smells, the screams, the bewilderment, the pain, the suffering is unimaginable. The waste that was laid to families and nations and people and civilizations that was laid to our families, to our people, to our nations, to our civilizations is truly unimaginable. So with no attempt at exaggeration, no attempt at drama or rhetoric, I must begin my talk about male-female relationships with a statement that has been made by many people, including one of the elementary school teachers at my elementary school, PS 21, Sister Adelaide Sanford, and including one of my teachers in college, who was Professor John Henry Clark. Brothers and sisters, if I go wrong, it won't be because I had bad teaching. But the thing that they have often said is that it's a miracle, an absolute miracle, that we still have men, that African people still have men, still have women, much less relationships. And then it's an even greater miracle that we still have African men and women who have retained the will, who have retained the strength, who have retained the integrity that is required to meet together with another person to try to establish and maintain a relationship. And it's a miracle of rightness, of correctness, and of such ma'at that we must be thankful to both the Creator and the ancestors. And in addition to being thankful, we have to take the time to figure out exactly what this miracle means and figure out a way to utilize it. How is it that we have the miracle of African man and woman surviving through a holocaust of rape, murder, and separation to form relationships? How is it that in the face of this continuing horrendous oppression of our people, a Nelson and Winnie Mandela can emerge? How can an Alton and Leola Maddox, or Brother Bill and how can a Brother Bill and Sister Kefa, or Minister and Mrs. Louis Farrakhan, or Brother Harold and Eloise Dix, Brother Harold and Eloise Dix in their 70s, a lot of people here know them, still in their 70s and still struggling. Or even a Jesse and Jacqueline Jackson. Yes, they're a miracle too. How can these African men and women, in the face of a continuing Holocaust, continue to work and struggle together, to love, to have children, manage to retain enough manliness and enough womanliness to form relationships? If we approach this subject in this way, we will understand that we're involved in something which is not abstract, not academic, but something real and practical and sacred and of utmost urgency and importance. Therefore, there's a way we will conduct ourselves, even during the question and answer period. There is a love and tolerance and unity that we must extend to each other if any good is to come from this conference. We must be serious, intelligent, and rational, and emotional, and we must allow our brothers and sisters here to do the same without trying to destroy each other or the validity of our respective experiences. Because ultimately, our collective experiences are interconnected and are one. As was said by Marcus Garvey, so is our aim and our destiny. Remember, it is only because of a Holocaust that someone else is making that the turmoil that often erupts at conferences such as these erupts and gets out of hand. For 11 main reasons spanning 4 areas or continuums, the most well-planned and organized relationships conferences are potential powder kegs. Reason number 1 is that there are a lot of unhappy brothers and sisters out there who attribute their unhappiness to the quality, the presence, or absence of their relationships. Reason number 2 is that there are fundamental religious and philosophical concepts associated with ideas about how men and women should relate one to another. And by definition, religious concepts are emotional, and when we have disagreements with emotional importance, that is a potentially explosive situation. And I don't want to imply that the philosophical and so-called rational concepts are any less explosive, Because when a person feels that they are being rational and someone else disagrees with them, what is the person who disagrees with them? Irrational, that's right. So that's another potentially explosive situation. There's no fanatic like a rational fanatic. You know, because such a person doesn't think that they're right, such a person knows that they're right. You see what I'm saying? In general, there are 4 areas or continuums, I said, upon which these disagreements will play themselves out. Number 1 is the power, control, decision-making continuum. Number 2 is the freedom, restriction continuum. Number 3 is the independency, dependency continuum. And number 4 is the exclusivity, inclusivity continuum. Now I'll try to explain a little bit about what I mean by that. What's ironic about all these differences is that African man and woman argue over these issues while the oppressor creates conditions that don't permit either African man or woman to truly select their positions on any of those issues. On the power, control, decision-making continuum, neither the man nor the woman is going to be the boss of what happens. While white folks are educating our children, while white folks are determining whether or not the garbage is collected, what we see on our TV, what we read in our newspaper, what we hear on our radio. So in a sense, we generate all this heat and argument about nothing. On the restriction, freedom continuum. In other words, who's going to stay in the home and who's going to go out and who's going to have freedom. While we argue about those particular things, the European is deciding which jobs both of us will not have. The European is deciding who's going to go to jail and who's going to be homeless, and how neither the African man or the African woman is going to escape from this Holocaust. While we argue about who's going to do the dishes or who's going to do the housework, the European has assured that doing dishes and cleaning of some sort are the only jobs that you're going to get. On the inclusivity, exclusivity continuum. In other words, are we going to have polygamy? Are we going to have monogamy? Are we going to have this? We love to go off about this. You see, what's going to be, what and who is going to be included in our relationships? While we argue about that, the European is ensuring through forced incarceration of our men, through forced incarceration of our women, through forced living conditions in shelters, through substance abuse and through biological warfare, he's ensuring that there is no exclusivity of any sort in our relationships, and that every invader, every outsider, including AIDS virus, will be included into the relationships of African man and African woman. While Holocaust victims argue over dependency issues, who's going to get the salary and who's going to take care of whomever, the European is determining that they will both be dependent on a welfare check or an inadequate housing allowance or some sort of inadequate salary. Now, that deals with the areas in which we have conflict. But let's get back to the reasons why we get this explosiveness at these conferences. Reason number 3 is that there are a lot of unhappy people out there, and they blame the quality, presence, or absence of a man-woman relationship on their unhappiness. Reason number 4 is that there are characterological and personality issues that can play themselves out around this issue of male-female relationships. So that Ayikwe Armah speaks of, not in European terms, but he speaks of the disease of too much suspiciousness, the disease of too much control, wanting too much control, the disease of wanting too much attention. And what we find is that people who have these particular characterological flaws or these particular characterological tendencies will try to organize their relationships, and will actually, their behavior at relationships conferences will be determined by those flaws. So that we get a person who has a disease of too much suspiciousness, pathological jealousy is a part of that. And that person wants to organize their relationship in such a way where they can check on every possible movement that their spouse or their partner can make. We get the disease of wanting too much attention, and we have that person at a relationships conference says something inflammatory and goes off. Reason number 5 is that there are a lot of unhappy people out there, and these unhappy people often blame the presence, the absence, or the quality of their man-woman relationships for their unhappiness. Reason number 6 is that there are survival, genetic, survival, biological, survival, existence issues and perhaps even biological programming that goes into how we feel about relationships. There's a whole field called sociobiology that talks about behavior of people being gene regulated. They take the brain and all that stuff out of it. They say that basically animals and even people act in a way that's going to ensure the presence of their genes in the next generation. Frances Welsing is talking about that when she associates the racist and white supremacist behavior of white supremacists as having nothing to do with some ideas and nothing to do with some feelings, but having to do with their genetic deficiency and their need to maintain their select mating pool in the face of African male genetic dominance that can wipe them out in just a couple of generations. Reason number 7 is that there are a lot of unhappy people out there, and these unhappy people often attribute their unhappiness to the quality, the presence, or the absence of a man-woman relationship. Reason number 8 is that there are political and economic interests and consequences to the ways that man and woman relate to each other, and to the ways that African man and African woman relate to each other. Who can be president of an organization or nation, and who's going to be the secretary? Who's going to get a salary and who is not, are underlying issues that can explode at a relationships conference. The 8th reason is that there are external forces and interests in how African men and women relate one to another. There are people who would, for instance, send people into a conference like this, as happened to Barbara and myself at an AIDS conference. People that have no interest in even participating in an African man-woman relationship. And these people, in an attempt to draw attention to themselves, or who might feel it is an alternative, their lifestyle is an alternative to African man-woman relationships, might be another source of explosion or sort of the explosiveness in these relationships. Reason number 9 is that there are a lot of unhappy people out there, and these unhappy people often attribute their unhappiness to the presence or absence or the quality of their man-woman relationships. So you see that I attributed at least half of the explosiveness that can be at such a conference to the unhappiness that comes from the absence of a satisfying relationship. So what's the source of unhappiness in our relationships? Why don't we have lasting, victorious relationships to the extent that we would like to have them? Reason number 1 is that Holocaust I was just talking about. And reason number 2 is that we have not committed ourselves to pay the price. Now for me, price is an acronym or an abbreviation for P for P for purpose, R for reciprocity, I for integrity, C for complementarity, and E for ecosystems. Again, something that I'll have to explain. You see, when I say purpose, I mean that when you start a relationship, you have to make sure that that person's purpose and your purpose and the purpose of our people are the same. And for those of you who undergo some sort of a dramatic change in your consciousness during the course of a relationship, you're going to have to invest all of that energy that you might want to invest in changing the world. You're going to have to invest a certain part of that in converting your partner or converting your spouse. Because if you don't, then you're going to have the unhappiness of crossed purposes. When I say reciprocity, what I'm speaking about is that you have to have a give and receive in a relationship. A giving and receiving has to go on that's going to make sure that all of the needs of both of the partners are met. If you don't have this giving and this receiving, then you're going to have the unhappiness of exploitation. Because when one person is receiving what they need and the other person isn't receiving what they need, then that can be called exploitation. Integrity means that we have to have a truthfulness and honesty in our relationships that starts, as Susan was speaking, with your mirror in the morning. You must have that integrity in your relationships, or you're going to have to accept the unhappiness of deceit and guilt or shame. Complementarity means that there must be a fit of both masculine and feminine qualities that gets all of the needs of the relationship and all of the work done, or you must accept the unhappiness of two left shoes. Ecosystem refers to the fact that your relationship cannot survive in a vacuum. It must be interrelated in a supportive system that can provide the stability and assurance of balance, integrity mechanisms for emergency healing and conflict resolution. A Holocaust makes the price all the more dear, and hence the unhappiness that explodes at these conferences. Yet with all of our unhappiness, with all the external forces, the economic and political and religious and philosophical differences, we can certainly have a peaceful and productive conference because we ourselves are walking miracles. We are people who have preserved our rhythms and beats even when our drums were taken away. We are people who have kept the rhythm of African life even when we had to do it with our feet. And I want you to think of rhythm masters like Sammy Davis Jr. or Gregory Hines or the Nicholas Brothers. Never mind Sammy's hair, never mind his ex-wife, or never mind Gregory's current wife, although those things may be very distressing. Those things are very distressing. But they don't take away from the miracle. Because you see, they actually even make the miracle more miraculous. In other words, the ancestors can leave their gifts in almost any African vessel. Even after body has been destroyed, even after mind has been destroyed, the ancestors can make spirit still survive, and we have it erupting. We have it erupting in our music, we have it erupting in our rhythms, we have it erupting in our relationships. And the beauty of all this, the thing that gives us all the hope, is this fact, that when all of our musicians are destroyed, when all of our instruments are destroyed, when Errol Garner is born, or a Stevie Wonder is born, African people again have African music. So that when a Winnie Mandela, when an Alton Maddox, when a Nelson Mandela, when a Leola Maddox, when those people are born and have that model that we can take a look at of how couples can love and work and struggle together, African people, again, have viable African relationships. And yet, if it was just these random occurrences were the only thing that we had to look forward to, maybe it wouldn't make sense for us to have a relationships conference. But our panelists are bringing us a message that tells us we can look forward to more than that. We can look forward to that same message that I said Ayikwe Amma said, which is that the destroyed who retain the desire to remake themselves and act upon that desire, remake themselves. And we're going to remake ourselves, brothers and sisters. Not just isolated examples of health, but generations and regenerations that will span through time, through centuries and millennia of time. African men and African women are going to have relationships because we African men love you, my sisters, and we know that you love us, and we know that as long as we retain the desire to remake ourselves and act upon that desire, we will remake ourselves. Hotep, brothers and sisters.
All right. See, we're moving ahead. I want you all to know that we have a wonderful group of people who have come together, both as participants from the general community and as people who are trying to bring their individual thoughts to you as panel members. And I want you to know, in particular, Sister Susan told me to let you know that Brother James Mc Intosh is a psychiatrist, and he is practicing here in the Harlem community. So we do have some people who have some expertise from our ancestors, that ancestral brilliance. You know, to help us get our minds and our spirits back in place. As you see, we have Sister Camille and Sister Susan dealing with our spiritual aspects. I want to say that I come as a true representative of all those people that they mentioned. I've gone out with the short. I've gone out with the the illiterate. I've gone out with those who we've had cross purposes. I felt that my life was destroyed because my relationships weren't proper. I have laid in the street and been scraped up by Lisa and Susan and James, both James. So I represent here one of those struggling to find that path and that strength. And so I'm going to come to you and humble myself to you and let you know who I am. I'm looking, just like everybody else. See, because life is hard right now. Life is beautiful and it's wonderful, and I pray to the Creator and to my ancestors every single day. But at the same time that it's beautiful and it's wonderful and it's rewarding, and I have my child and I studied my books and I have my degree, I also have all the problems that everybody else has, trying to make it through and be a person who walks with internal peace and harmony, and who is able to find that mayat that brings that peace and harmony out into the external world and allows them to be in proper relationship with everything else in the universe around them. So that's what I'm looking for, and I need all the help that I can get, and you sustain me. You sustain me. Your input, your output, touching you, talking to you, your being there, coming through the street, seeing the smiles, there are things that sustain me. I'm going to talk a little bit about the physical aspects of relationships, because I think we can't afford to come together at any time during this holocaust of epidemics that are affecting us on a physical level and not talk about them. But before I get to that, I want to say a few things. I want to say that I remember in the 60s, and I remember my grandparents telling me about in the 20s and in the 30s, and my parents telling me about in the 40s, when African people in this community and the Bed-Stuy community and the other African communities of this country did not pass each other without saying hello sister and hello brother. I remember that. I lived that. I was part of that. I walked through the streets of Harlem in 1969 and 1970 when no one passed another African person without a nod and a greeting and sending out a positive, beautiful, pleasant vibe. And there was a connection there. And there were a lot of things wrong, and there were a lot of problems that we were grappling with, but we were more connected in ways than we have been lately. And I want us to start being connected, at least in those ways, again, right away. So as we leave here tonight, and as we walk through the streets of Harlem and Bed-Stuy and Brownsville and St. Albans and wherever we are from, tomorrow, tonight, for the rest of our lives, whether the people respond or not, I want us to begin to say hello sister, hello brother. And when we see elders, I want us to say hello mother, hello father, because they are all our mothers and they are all our fathers. And as we see our youth, we must speak to our youth. All of us must speak to our youth with love, whether it is to encourage them in whatever they're doing, correct them in whatever they're doing, or to just acknowledge the importance of their existence. That is part of us coming back together and reforming the African strong family that we must be, that we have always been. And that's something I want us to take out of here tonight and actually do and incorporate into our lifestyles again. We have to connect to each other. We can't afford not to do that. And that touching each other is not, hey baby. That's not what it is. See, because even if it's coming from your heart and you're trying to acknowledge the beauty that you see or the attraction that you feel, what you have to understand is that everything in this society has reduced us to being disrespectful and on a very lascivious, at a very base level, a very physical level. And what we're going to now try to do is take everything back up to a spiritual level. I don't come necessarily with a principle that is pro-monogamy or pro-polygamy. I come with a perspective of myself, of what I can handle, but I respect whatever it is that people decide to do, as long as it's done with love and harmony and honesty, true honesty among the people that it's done. And I think that as we build whatever it is that's going to take for us to move into the future, that honesty and that love and that spirituality has to be the core and the base that everything is built on. And that is called Mayat. That balance and harmony is called Mayat. And it's the principle that I constantly talk about, and I don't want us to ever forget it. We can't ever forget it. One of the tricks that's being played upon us right now is that we are being victimized and we are being assaulted in very, very many ways. The attack of the oppressor is thorough, and it is on every single plane of human existence, no matter what way you look at it, whether it is economic, whether it is religious, whether it is academic, whether it is through entertainment, whether it is through the very air that we breathe, we are under attack. And we must come together and with insight and with research and with strength and with courage and with prioritizing the future and our children as the main aim of the decisions that we make, come up with some plans so that we are going to survive. One of the things that is a major attack upon us and that is affecting very, very heavily what is happening between males and females is the epidemic of AIDS. That epidemic that was introduced into the world in such a confused manner, in such a brilliant manner, a manner that said, this is a disease that is primarily of some people somewhere else, from some monkeys somewhere. And as far as this country, it has to do with some perverse Caucasians somewhere else. Therefore, our community, which happens to have had for millions of years a tendency to make decisions that said behavior that is proper has to do with the continuation of the African family, and therefore there was always a general rejection of homosexuality based more on that type of perspective than any other type of perspective. Our community automatically turned away from looking at the problem as one of our own. Our community was very slow in mobilizing and educating itself and looking at the problem and looking at the sources. You know, there's an African proverb that says, a man woke up and found a tiger in his bed, and so he killed the tiger, and then he went back to bed, but he didn't look around to see where the tiger came from, and a leopard came through the window and ate him. So we have to look at where the source of these attacks are coming from, as well as set up structures to combat them. Now, we have been turned off generally in thinking about AIDS. They brought it to us. They said, in this country, it's in the white homosexual community. We never want to talk about that. In this country, it's among IV drug abusers. Well, many people said, well, they deserve to die. What they did put them in that position, both groups of people. Many people said it was a curse from God, and therefore distanced ourselves intellectually, spiritually, emotionally from even giving compassion to those people who were ill. But we also distanced ourselves in a mental way from examining what this was all about. And what this was all about was what everything else is about, which is the genocide of African people. That's what this is about. African people have been at war with European people since we have first come in contact with each other. Since they came out of the caves, realized they were behind everybody else, understood, as Dr. Welsing says, that they could be easily annihilated. When they came in contact with a people that was so creative, that was so strong, that was so giving, that was so thriving, that they developed a warring culture that has as its very base control and the elimination of large numbers of people of color periodically every century. Now you can look around. The Tasmanians are gone. You can look around. Basically, the indigenous American people who were here, the indigenous people are gone. We can go group after group or area after area. Where is the area that the greatest wealth is? Where is the area that is still pure? Where is the area that is colonized in the north by the Arabs and colonized in the south by the Europeans? Where is the area that is wanted by everybody? It's our area. It's our area. Look at this country. People were brought here to work the land, to create an economy, to build an industrial society, ultimately, machines, computers. There's no longer a need for all this manpower. People have literally been turned out into the streets to die. We did not grow up seeing people living in the streets. The only people you saw in New York who lived in the streets used to be some white people down in the Bowery who drank wine. But we have been conditioned to accept the fact that people have been turned out to live in the streets. That our men, 3/4 of them, are associated with the penal system. That 1 in 4 persons who are adult and sexually active in New York City is supposed to be HIV positive. Now you better hear what I'm saying to you. Because in the media, they are saying to their community, the virus has not spread among heterosexual people the way we had first predicted. It's no longer as big a problem as we thought it was going to be. The alarm is starting to be silenced. But in our community, it is raging. It is the #1 killer of young African women in the age group 24 to 30. It is the #1 killer of young African men in the age group 30 to 39. The #1 killer. And we're being told, don't talk about it. It is a disease that has a latency period of up to 10 years, which means that our teenagers who are being overstimulated sexually by every single mode that this society can manage to conceive of are being infected while they're teenagers. Our teenagers are being infected. They are affecting the next generation, the ones who have not been caught by heroin, alcohol, methadone, crack, pills, cigarettes, dropped out of school. The ones who have not been caught by that, or even the ones who have been caught by that, are also being attacked by this virus. They are under threat of finding out that in 10 years or 5 years, their lives are about to come to an end. Now, of course, there's some stuff happening over in Africa that may change that around, and I hope that that does. But right now, we have to look at what that must mean. First of all, we have to have these kinds of meetings more and more. You see, because it's a sign to me of mental illness for people to be sitting around talking about The Simpsons and your child is on crack. It's a sign of mental illness for you to know what Rachel did yesterday, but you don't know where your child is right now. It's a sign of mental illness for Nyeri to be talking about going to part-time next year, and we have all these Caucasians teaching that Christopher Columbus discovered America to our African children. It's a sign of mental illness that they could dare suspend automatics and the so-called lawyers and other professionals and so-called other economically or so-called stable part of our communities can be so comfortable. That they have become so comfortable in their oppression. Then this is surely a people who are doomed to die. So we must come together and we must target each issue that must be spoken about. And we must grapple with it in the spirit of love. And we must come up with conclusions. And we must go on to the next problem. And we must save our political war heroes who are in prison. And we must rescue our children. And we must change our behavior patterns, because the only way that the Europeans are getting to us are when we are not following moral behavior patterns. Behavior patterns that are based on spiritual dignity, on harmony with the universe and with the greater being and with our ancestors. See, because you don't smoke crack if you're in spiritual harmony. You don't sleep around if you're in spiritual harmony. You're on top of what's happening to your child if you're in spiritual harmony. So the only ways that they're getting to us is where we are not using self-discipline and our own spirituality. But it's there for us, and we're going to begin to use it. And we're going to begin to have these meetings, and these meetings are going to get so big, we're going to have to start getting places like Madison Square Garden. And we're going to get the videos, and we're going to get the tapes, and we're going to talk about them to our friends, and we're going to drag the reluctant people in our families to whom becoming Afrocentric and becoming progressive is so threatening to them, because it's like being in jail 30 years. You know, you can be in jail 30 years, and then it's time for you to come out, and you're afraid to go out. You'd rather stay in jail just because you got used to being there. Well, we're not going to be used to being in here anymore. We're coming out of jail. Now, I want to say about AIDS. We're going to stay on top of this thing with these brothers in Kenya. For those of you who do not know, there are two brothers in Kenya who have come up with a combination of elements that they say will cure AIDS. Now, I'm doing my best to go find out about it. And we're going to bring that information back to you, and any other information as it comes. But in the meantime, I want people to examine their own selves. Examine your behavior. First of all, find out what your status is. Find out whether you are HIV positive or negative. You cannot afford the luxury of fear, because you have to, first of all, build and protect those around you that you care about, and then you have to fight back your own self. See, because if you're HIV positive and you're my patient, you're not giving up. You're going to come and fight back. You don't give up. So you have to find out what your status is. It's real important. It's like women walking around with lumps in their breasts. There's a cancer epidemic of breast cancer in this country. 1 in 10 women have breast cancer. And there are African women dying at higher rates than white women, because African women find lumps in their breasts and are afraid to go find out what they are. We cannot afford the luxury of fear about anything. We have to have the truth about everything in order to fight back in the situation that we're in. So you first find out what your status is. You second identify who it is that you're going to be intimate with, and you stay with that person or those people. And you close your circle, because this is not 1973, and you cannot be rolling around, you know, being close to anything moist. We have to talk about celibacy. as being a very real state for very many people. And when people are in that state, they need to be supported and loved, because it doesn't mean that you don't need something. It means that you need a lot of support. We have to talk to our children about virginity, both male and female. We have to re-elevate the act of intimacy to a spiritual level so that it means something more than a fast, quick, erotic payoff. You know, because like they say, everybody's looking to get paid. So let's start getting paid spiritually. And we have to take control of the media. We have to take control of the educational system, and we have to take control of the health system. Now, I'm going to stop, because Sister Lisa told me 15 minutes. And I could start talking about what they're doing at St. Luke's Hospital, and how they're pushing all the Medicaid. The few doctors left, not the mills, but the few doctors left who were taking Medicaid out. And I could talk about how the long-range plan may be to close Harlem Hospital, and we're going to talk about every one of those things. But I just want to put little seeds out there. You know, as Gary says, you plant seeds first. And I'm going to say that we promise you we're going to have more meetings, and that we are going to work out our problems. Hotep, my brothers and sisters.
Hotep, brothers and sisters. The message you needed, you've already gotten. I mean, sometimes we overeat, and that's bad for you. So I'm going to cut my 15 minutes, Lisa, to about 5 to 10. Because the remedy that I would suggest we begin to pursue, along with all of the other enlightened directions that's been offered by my sisters and brother, is that, well, I'll tell you a little parable. I like parables. This morning I was in Washington, D.C. speaking to some ninth graders. And when I got through, one of the young persons asked, he said, "Professor Small, why is it important to know African history?" So I said, well, let me tell you a parable. I said, why is it important for a squirrel to know that it is a squirrel? Right? And I gave an example of a squirrel that kept company with rabbits. And that this squirrel who hung with these rabbits was being taught everything about life by the rabbits. He didn't have a squirrel blueprint for living. And so one day some hunters came upon the rabbits and the squirrel. And the rabbits, who had a blueprint for how a rabbit should live in its ecology, ran for the briar patch. Well, the squirrel, who had the rabbit's blueprint, ran for the same briar patch. The problem was the rabbit's skin was thick enough and his fur was fluffy enough that the briar didn't harm the rabbit. It tore the squirrel apart. It didn't leave much for the hunter in the first place. African people are looking in every direction for the solution except Africa. Like the squirrel, your nature was designed by the divine. Not me, not you. The nature of the African was designed by the divine. Whatever you call it, the divine. Both within and without, but that is the causation for us. If we are to fulfill the purpose of that nature, then we have to return and become conscious of what the blueprint is in order to fulfill that. That means you must be very clear on your history, as Dr. McIntyre outlined a certain phase of our history, a part of our great Holocaust. It didn't start 500 years ago. This encounter started more than 3,000 years ago. We have been at war for more than 3,000 years with the same persons as Dr. Justice outlined. And so we have to be very clear that you can pursue any road you wish. You can pursue any religion you wish. You can name and call upon any gods you wish. You will be in no better shape than the squirrel unless you pursue Africa. And unless you pursue. Now, sometimes we think that we are a small group of people, and so it would be easy and quick to recreate ourselves. But we've got to think in terms of our size so that we'll understand the task. In North America, there's more than 40 to 50 million of us. In Central South America, there is more than 100 million of us. In the rest of the Caribbean, there's close to another 20 million of us. On the continent, there's bordering close to 1 billion of us. When we include the Pacific Islands, Southern Asia, and Europe, there is more than 1 billion of us. And none of us fare well anywhere we're located. And the reason is the same. All of us are looking towards something other than our divine nature for our salvation. And let me explain. I don't want to get too philosophical with divine nature. What I mean simply by divine nature, we're not looking to our historical reality to determine the next step. We're not looking back at ourselves to decide where we're standing now. If we are to make a decision on how we are to be together, we must be very clear on the experience that arrived us at this point. That means you must be very clear on your history. It means you must understand very clearly what experiences were successful for you when you met certain challenges and what experiences was not good for you when you met certain challenges. That means you must look back and see ourselves in the way we describe. We talk about Afrocentricity, and when I got to the second school in Washington this morning, there was a young white lady there, and I was introduced to her, and she said, I'm in charge in Washington, D.C., the school system, of putting together the Afrocentric curriculum. And so in her area, and she said she followed that as if anyone knew what Afrocentric means. I said, I know. She says, well, what is it? I said, it is looking at the world through the experience of the African. That is the only way the African can see the world, and if you are seeing the world any other way, you are mentally ill, as Barbara just said. And as James outlined, African men and African women, despite all of the damage, we've been at a bloody war. If you study the history, you'll realize we were at war. And you realize in war, people get injured. And injured people do not act the same as those who have not been injured. Okay? And we won't condemn ourselves for our injuries. We will begin to learn how to compensate for the illness caused from the injuries. And we will find ourselves being better about being together. Because I remember growing up, all the music that I heard was about loving our women. You remember all the music? When we controlled our music, the music, we couldn't say it in other ways. We couldn't bring much money home, and we couldn't give you status in society, but we could sing to you that we love you. And we did it all the time. We did it everywhere. But then they took the music, they heard what we were saying. So they took the music, and somebody else controls the production of black music now. They even write what they want us to stand up to the mic and sing. And what they began to write and what they began to sing was abusive and disgraceful for any being to say to their women. So I came today because I simply wanted to say I want to help bring back that music that say, I love you. You see, I want to help bring back that music that say, I'm worthy of love, because I'm struggling to do what Susan say, to be clear about loving myself, because I understand that love, it is love that seeks love. And so if I have love in me, I will understand love in you. And I can't possibly love you in a greater way than I can love the thing that's most closest to me, and that is myself. So this self-love, as Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad and others taught before them, this self-love can only be realized if you understand the family in which you belong, if you understand the nature of the culture and the history of the race that produced the biology that has raised itself to a consciousness to talk about loving itself. Now, we have to be very clear. You want a solution to the problem? The solution can only be found in Africa, in looking at the history, in looking at the culture. We've tried everything else. Nothing has worked. In concluding, Malcolm left a statement with us, which wasn't his creation. Any Means Necessary was not created by Malcolm. It was just sunk into our consciousness by Malcolm, because he was trying to repeat something he understood when the spirit and ancestors of Africa found life in him. He talked about any means necessary. That is the fundamental statement at the basis of the culture of Africa. It doesn't mean we must return back to peculiar and particular behavioral patterns of the 1800s, 1700s, 1400s or so. It does mean, though, we must understand what the fundamental principles were that those people formed their ideas out of. Those are constant, because one thing that I know about Africa and its culture, Africa saw itself as an imitation of nature itself, which is the imitation of the creation itself. And that's all we were trying to do. And if we would understand that that then means we must do whatever is necessary to be, like everyone else has said, at one with the great causation again. How do we get in this harmony? How do we get at one? The one road that we've never taken. We exalt the great leaders like Garvey and Nkrumah and Malcolm and the others, but we have not taken the road they outlined. We did not, and we do not, for the most part. If we are serious about the grand and glorious ones, if we really heard Harriet Tubman and understood why this woman who came to freedom and didn't have to ever look back, went back as long as she had the strength to go back, if we ever truly understand what that was about, if we understand, you'll understand that she knew there could be no peace in her. And I'll deviate and tell you how the Buddha said it. A lot of us get off in other things. Buddha is sitting there one day on his way to death, and all of his minor Buddhas came around crying, and the others in their crying was exalting their nirvana. They had found nirvana. And Buddha looked at them and says, you're all wrong. You cannot find nirvana until all that don't have it also finds it. You understand? Harriet understood there could be no freedom for Harriet Tubman until there was freedom for all of the Harriet Tubman. And as simple as that sound, as Barbara outlined, don't pass these people in the streets asking you for money unless you give them something. Don't pass them. Now, sometimes I get a little tad of someone, wonder if he's going to buy drugs. So I say, okay, come on, I'll go to the store. I'll buy you some food. 99% of them go to that store, buy that food, and eat that food. Don't pass these people. If you've got 25 cents and you're healthily walking along, give it up if it's the last 25 cents. That may be all you can do, but that love that Barbara talked about will be felt by that person. I've walked these streets for 30-something years now, and when I have fear inside buildings like this, I don't have to fear in the streets of Harlem. I don't have to fear. The brothers who are on junk call me Brother Small, and they don't disrespect me because they know if I have a quarter, they got the quarter. And sometimes I may give them a lecture with the quarter, but they're going to get the quarter. You see, because I understand that our brothers and sisters that are on alcohol, our brothers and sisters that are on drugs, our brothers and sisters that are in prison are what? They're victims and casualties of war. And I, who am healthy, have the primary responsibility to try and suggest to them where to look to find a solution to the situation that allows them to be victims in this war. And so I'll end with just this one thing. There is absolutely no place to turn. There is nowhere to look. We've done it. We've looked everywhere. We've turned everywhere. The only place that we can look, and we should get about it immediately, many of this aspects of what I'm saying has been said in pieces so you can understand parts of it, but unless you turn to Africa, you can forget it. Go get some bleaching cream and join the enemy, because you will not win.
Those of you who have had the wonderful experience of listening to Sister Camille Yarborough, every time this sister gets on WLIB, every time she speaks, she is such an educator. She's such a healer. See, people who talk about healing don't really know what they're talking about. You got to deal with this sister to really appreciate how important she has always been to our community. And I just want to express that in a very, very public way, Sister Camille. You are a wonderful, inspiring African queen, and we love you. Really. You know, it's unusual to be seated in a group of people and you love all of them. It's unusual. I say that because, you know, people called me from a network yesterday. They wanted me to do an appearance with Fred McRae. I said, no, the spirit, the ancestors won't allow me to do that. But Dr. James Small, I mean, every time I'm around this brother, you learn something new. He is such a wonderful educator. I'm not going to even tell y'all all the stories about Malcolm because he told me not to talk about that. But this brother goes way, 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 way back. And he has been the same all the time. You can't say enough about the two physicians who are up here. You know, when they told us about doctors, y'all know all these stories about doctors, what they're supposed to stand for. But when you look at our sister, Dr. Barbara Justice, and Dr. James McIntosh, you know, these are the people you can call them any time of day, any time of night, and they will attest to this because I've done it. I call Dr. McIntosh with a client from New Jersey. I think it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. I said, James, you got to see this brother now. And he did. He was in Jersey, and James was trying to say, well, you know, James gets real, you know, formal on you initially. But after I just said, man, you got to see this brother now. He saw this brother, and I shared this with him a couple of days ago. His mother called to say that Dr. Mc Intosh literally saved his life. And this is a few days ago. Susan Taylor, our sister who runs Essence. I had the privilege, and Susan didn't know this, and it's good every now and then when you spy on our sisters and brothers. My daughter graduated from Spelman College a few weeks ago, and the person who gave one of the most powerful commencement addresses I have ever heard was my sister, Susan Taylor. And it was just a magnificent experience. I mean, she talked to the Lisa did. She talked heart to heart. There was no profiling. And she's really wonderful things. One of the things she told, and I told Kamara this too, I said, Kamara, you got to listen to that. She said, one of the things is this. You need to have a bank account in your name. And you need to be able to have enough put away so that you can live 3 years no matter what the husband who you think you came here to marry is going to do. Now that's some advice. When I was at Morehouse and Spelman, people weren't saying that. You know, you go to school to marry somebody. Susan said, let me tell you, my sisters, what it's like out here. And she was real. She was historical. And she was very, very inspiring. But our sister, who never ceases to amaze me, I mean, you know, Lisa is getting like Minister Farrakhan now. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do something very, very commercial. I'm going to do something very, 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 very commercial and say this. I just want to be able to deal with some of the video rights. But I say this in a very, very sincere way. Lisa is one of the tallest trees in the African forest. And I'm going to do something in a moment. And it's going to be a surprise to all of y'all, but I know y'all going to respond because I hear the way you clapping. But just to express how we feel about what she's doing, let me just digress one moment to say this to you. One of the things that we've tried to do in practicing law in this war zone called New York City is to sound alarms to our community. One of the alarms I want to sound to you right now is something that's been going on for a number of weeks. Our brother, our comrade, Nelson Mandela is about to come to these shores. But I want to tell you something. I found this out several weeks ago, and I've been discussing it with people. I've told Reverend Butts, and I've told other people. We talked about it again last night. We were informed that there were high-level meetings in New York City. And those high-level meetings were to demand that when this brother comes to New York City, that he apologizes to the Jewish community. Listen to me, listen. That he apologizes to the Jewish community for meeting with Yasser Arafat. Listen to me. Now, If you have a newspaper today called Newsday, because Reverend Butts and I talked about this a number of weeks ago, and people said, no, that could not be the case. Read your Newsday today, because there are American Jewish leaders who have demanded a meeting with Nelson Mandela over in Geneva as we stand for him to, quote, clarify his position on Israel. And read it further, because it says that this takes off some of the pressure from the mayor, because high-level meetings have been going on with aides, with Jewish leaders who said they're going to demonstrate when he comes here to New York City. Now, the only thing that I'm doing is sharing some information that we received. But I want you to be very, very conscious, my sisters and brothers. You see, because Reverend Butts was asked to denounce Minister Farrakhan a few years ago, and he never did it. We all know the games that they've played with our brother, Reverend Jesse Jackson. So I just want to sound that alarm, because there are some people who really think that maybe instead of taking a parade on Fifth Avenue with ticker tape, that maybe there should be some real visits to our community. But I just share that with you. Let me make one other point, and then I'm going to do what I was called up here to do, and I know y'all are going to respond in the way in which you responded all night. Isn't that right? All right. We had a meeting with a group of community leaders and elected officials and others, the people from Bensonhurst, the other night. And I just wanted to read a couple of very, very short sentences about that, and then I'm going to make an appeal. This group of people from Bensonhurst, people representing the Stewarts, Hawkins, Yusuf Hawkins, Reverend Sharpton, Alton Maddox, myself, and people who are involved with the United African Movement, met with a number of people from Bensonhurst. And tomorrow at 1 o'clock on the steps of City Hall, and I give you this now, this is a press release that's going to go out tomorrow, but our people are more important than any press. And if there's ever any leak that I can give to my community before other people start messing with it, that's what we're going to do. So tomorrow at 1 o'clock, we're going to be on the steps of City Hall. And this is what this group from Bensonhurst and the rest of us are going to call for. We're calling on Governor Mario Cuomo, Attorney General Robert Abrams, person who loves us, and Mayor David Dinkins to personally appear in Supreme Court, Kings County on Monday, June 11th, at the sentencing of Joseph Fama and Keith Mandela, to make statements against racial violence and to demand maximum sentences for Mrs. Fama and Mandela. As a deterrent to those who would contemplate engaging in acts of racial violence. We're not asking for any aides. We're not asking for any representatives. We don't know any more business that's more important on Monday morning than Governor Mario Cuomo, Robert Abrams, who forgot to file the fact that he was supposed to be the Attorney General, and Mayor David Dinkins to appear in that courtroom on Monday to demand that those two people be given maximum sentences. In addition to that, the leadership of the Bensonhurst community shall convene a meeting on Sunday, June 10th, demanding that Justice Thaddeus Owens impose maximum sentences on Mrs. Fama and Mandela, and the leadership will outline plans for disclosing the names of the 23 to 33 other perpetrators in the killing of Yusuf Hawkins, who are still at large. And this was a piece from our African genius. Our African genius whose license and whose commitment will never be suspended. This particular piece is from Alton Maddox. Alton says, the group is calling on the 5 defendants who are awaiting trial to plead guilty and cooperate with authorities to bring to justice the 23 to 33 other perpetrators who have not been arrested. In addition to that, the Bensonhurst leadership will target and monitor persons in its community who have a propensity to commit acts of racial violence and to monitor all conditions and circumstances that may or would lead to acts of racial violence. Upon the failure of the Bensonhurst leadership and its residents to fulfill these obligations on or before June 11th, the marches for justice for Yusuf Hawkins will resume in Bensonhurst on June 16th. In the interim, as an act of good faith, the United African Movement will suspend the march planned for this Saturday. Now, I can imagine the governor, who always talks about the family. You know he'll be there on Monday. And Bob Abrams, who did not even attend the funeral of Yusuf Hawkins, you know he'll be there on Monday. And we're praying also that Mayor Dinkins finds it in his heart also to be there on Monday, because we need to make some statements. And those statements need to be made very, very clear. You cannot wear a blue ribbon if you're not standing for justice. You cannot talk about harmony if you're not standing for justice. Let me just, now that I've done that, and I'm a walking deacon in Abyssinian now, and I probably have taken, too many privileges, but let me tell you the real reason I came up here over and above what we've just talked about. Our sister Lisa Williamson is head of one of the most beautiful organizations that is aimed at working with young people. It's called Our Children's Foundation. Now, I tell you that because I'm going to confess while I'm standing up here. I told Lisa, I said, Lisa, you got to do this full time. Lisa had a job at the time. Lisa left her job and said, I'm going to go out here and do this full time. And that's what she's been doing. And sisters and brothers, y'all know this to be the case. We must support each other. We don't need to talk about how great Malcolm is now, how great Dr. King is now. We have a sister right here who is doing work for us in our community and is devoting full time. Lisa works 18 to 20 hours a day. When you see her standing up here looking wonderful, I also know how tired this sister is working 18 to 20 hours a day. So I'm going to make an appeal, and Dr. Mc Intosh, Susan, and everyone else, all of the people up here on the panel are going to join me. And we need 50 people right now to come up down front with $100. That's going to be the starters. Now, if you want to give more than that, feel free. But I'm serious about this. I'm serious about this because Lisa has been running Our Children's Incorporated by blood, sweat, and tears. And I'm asking that we give support to her. I do civil rights work in New York City, and that's just like chopping cotton in Arkansas that I used to do 20 years ago. It's the same thing. We're just chopping cotton now on 125th Street. So none of us really have those kind of resources. But I'm asking you to make a sacrifice today. We're going to get everybody. You know, we're going to start with the $100 or the $500 or whatever you want to do. Then we're going to come down to the 50s. Then we're going to come down to the 20s. Then we're going to come down to the 10s.
Thank you. Hotep. Peace. Habarigani. Assalamu alaikum. How's everybody feeling? All right. Okay. Before I get started, I just want to say a few introductory comments, you know, because it really is an honor for me to be allowed to be in the presence of the people that sit before you. And I want to dedicate my words tonight to a good friend of mine, Doug E. Fresh. All right. The first thing that I would like to discuss is why this forum? Why did we have this forum? Why did you come out here tonight? The reason why we call this gathering is because there seems to be a high level of discussion in our community about black male-female relationships. And more recently, there's been a publication that I promised I wouldn't mention, but I can't help it. The Black Man's Guide to Understanding the Black Woman. And the only reason why I'm bringing the book up is because I really believe that we are in a state of war. And if we are to be soldiers in this war, we have to operate with some degree of mental clarity. How can we fight our oppressor if we are still confused about the people in our own house? How can you be down in the pit with your man or with your woman trying to shoot the enemy and you gotta watch your back? Now I thought to myself, what could I say tonight that wouldn't injure our community? Because, you know, racism is not only a system, a global system of discrimination, but it is a mental illness. And our people are so devastated and so sensitive that each word that you say becomes critical in the development of their minds and how they shape their lives. And so I said, my opinions about things are strange sometimes. I don't know how people will take them. So I went through a series of debates with myself. Should I say this? Should I not say that? And then I said, I just have to tell it like it is. To progress, you have to study yourself, and you have to understand why you do the things that you do. And I said to myself, Lisa, why do you have fear of saying it like it is? Because you live in a society where the truth is persecuted and desecrated and hidden. Which means now the bearers of truth, like Jesus Christ, like Marcus Garvey, like Malcolm X, like Harriet Tubman, like Alton Maddox, are always persecuted. Therefore, you know that the truth makes people feel uncomfortable. Because when you look at the truth, it causes you to look back at yourself. So then I said the best thing that we can do is look back at ourselves. And in this relationship situation, I tried to understand what is the reason why we haven't gotten clarity up until this point. And the answer for me was because everybody's lying. The black woman wants to talk about the black man. The black man wants to talk about the black woman. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you point your finger at him or her, you've got to point your finger at yourself. My premise is that we exist in a state of denial, which I am titling as triple jeopardy. Denial first of a system of racism. See, because when you deny the system of racism, that means that you don't fight against it. Which means now that you exist in a state of war that you don't resist. Which means now that you are in complicity with your own destruction because you are not a warrior against your oppression. As though the Muppet Man had contributed an equal amount of music and entertainment to the world. Something is wrong with that. And why is it that when great black people pass on, they show pictures of them when they were babies and when they were elders? What happened to all the pictures in between? Why is the European society so offended by the beauty, the grace, the elegance, the creativity of the black man and woman? Because they know that given the proper opportunity and an even scale and a truthful competition, they would lose. So now, if you raise your child to deny that he exists in a state of racism, then that is the first level of the triple jeopardy. The second level is capitalism. Now, we don't like to talk about that because all of us like to make a little bit of money sometimes. But we cannot deny that this system of capitalism, nationally and internationally, has gotten African people, not just you or him or her, the majority of African people in the worst possible condition. cruelty, which is anti-human and certainly anti-African. So now you raise a child who does not acknowledge racism, or acknowledges it a little bit but does not fight and struggle against it, does not read Carter G. Woodson, does not know Cheikh Anta Diop, has never heard of Franklin E. Frazier, did not read Lerone Bennett, doesn't give a hoot about Ivan Van Sertima. If you're raising children like that, you're raising victims of a war. And now, if your children are selfish, and you have taught them by your example to be material consumers, big cars, big houses, big everything for me, for I, for just me, then you now have created an individual that is antithetical to the survival of African people in this world. Now that we have the double jeopardy, we now enter the realm of triple jeopardy, which is just a general state of fantasy, which emanates out of too much TV, not wanting to feel too much pain, wanting to dodge the truth all the time. And then you say, these adults that you now have produced should have a relationship. And then you wonder why the relationships aren't working. But you've already denied racism, you've already denied capitalism, and you're in a general state of fantasy. But you want to integrate your world now with someone else. Triple jeopardy. You want to have your baby, and everybody's sitting around in the living room, and you want to tell him when he's a baby. You see him playing with the little girls. He's going to be something when he grows up. He's going to be a heartbreaker. He's going to have all the ladies crying. And you keep saying that year after year after year. Then by the time he's 18, 19, 21, he's something else. He got all the ladies crying. And now you want to criticize him for not being a moral individual. Well, you raised him that way. Then you take your little daughter and you sit her in the middle of the room, and everybody in the room gives her all the attention in the world. You're so beautiful. You're so lovely. Come to mommy. Come to daddy. Come to brother so-and-so. Come to sister so-and-so. Give her all that love and attention. Didn't tell her about the war. Didn't tell her about racism. Didn't tell her about capitalism. And never turned that TV off when it should have been off. Now your daughter calls home after she grows up, and you can't understand why she's out there sleeping with everyone for attention, looking for somebody to say, you're so beautiful, you're so lovely, you're so wonderful. You're 18, 19, 20, nobody's going to maintain the fantasy anymore. Now you're in a society that rejects your African beauty, dealing with a man that's a victim of a war-torn society. And you don't understand why you can't get what you had in the past. So if we raise our children to exist in a state of triple jeopardy, we then cannot ask them to be productive individuals in relationships. The biggest problem that I see in our relationships today is honesty. And I say that, and I mean that. And the reason why I believe that's true is because I think that we create bubbles around people so that they do not feel too much pain, so that we can just sink right into the triple jeopardy that we're used to, so that we don't even begin to tell the truth. So I would like to take the opportunity to give some of my opinions, which may seem strange, about black men and also black women. I'm going to start with the women. But before I start, I just want to say a few things. I am obviously a female. I am single and I am heterosexual. The reason why is because Dr. Justice taught me that, see, when you tell people the truth, they got to find something wrong with you so that they don't deal with it, you know. So I don't want the sisters to go home and say, well, you know, that Lisa Williamson, you know, she's a little too rough to be a girl. At the same time, I don't want the brothers to feel like I don't want to be loved and I don't love you, because that's not the case. But I'm going to try to be even-handed, and I'm going to try to tell the truth. Now, sisters, I'll start off with a little introduction. I think that most black women, in their hearts, are beautiful people and loving people and sensitive people. I think the reason why most women don't tell the truth about how they really feel about their man is because they're afraid of being hurt, afraid of having their openness sabotaged. And I think if sisters were to tell you, well, let me not speculate, let me tell you how I would feel about my man if he were healthy, if he were a warrior against racism, if he was fighting against capitalism, and if he didn't live in a state of fantasy. In my mind, it would be a battle, and this is the truth, to remember that he is not God, because I would love him that much. I relate a lot of stuff to music. And once a brother that I love said, well, you know, he asked me a question, and I said, well, do you know that song that, I think it's L.A. Babyface that sings it? It goes, whatever you want, it's all right with me, baby. That's how I feel
okay? But now if you go to a man with your heart on your sleeve, you worry because he sees you coming and he develops a strategy to kind of throw you off. So sisters then began to realize that, hey, this might be a game. And maybe I should stop telling the truth about how I feel about my man and play a game. And that's when sisters start to establish hidden agendas. The man says what he wants, and you agree to it, but you know you really don't agree. So he tells you, well, you know, it's not going to be anything heavy. You know, we're just going to get together every now and then, and you know, just like that. And you say, okay, but in your mind, you know you're going to try every trick in your bag to keep him. So now what happens is we have a dishonest situation. He has already told you what it isn't and what it is. You know in your mind what you want, but you establish a hidden agenda to get what you want, which he has not agreed upon. So now you have created a script for him, and when he deviates, you say he's a dog. So now my thing is, I'm not saying that brothers don't mess up, because brothers mess up. What I'm saying is, I try to, with my relationship, this is what I try to do. I try to say, look, what do you want to do? Then I tell him what I want to do. I tell him the truth. Now I say, brother, I'm not asking you to do what I say. I'm asking you to do what you say. Can you do that? A basic criteria going on, you know, a basic understanding. And then when a brother tells me that he's going to do what he says, and then I don't tell him what to say now. He tells me what he's going to do. And I say, okay, I make an assessment. Can I deal with that? Yes, okay, we're down with this program. All right. Now, then I sit back. I'm on chill out now. I'm on automatic. Everything's all right. And I just watch. Can you do what you say? So sisters, I would like to suggest that we begin to be a little more honest about our intentions. See, because you have to match up the goals of the relationship. If your goal is to get married and to have 4 children, and his goal is to lay down with you that night and never come back, that's not a match. That's not a match. Women, we have to develop a little common sense. A little common sense. Well, sisters say, well, why do you say that? I say that because a lot of times you see the signs, but you don't pay attention to them. If a brother is supposed to be your man, and you never met his mother, and you have his beeper number, or you call him and an answering machine comes on all the time. This might be a sign. This might be a sign. If he tells you his name is Rashad, and then you see another sister calling him Jamie, this might be an indication that there's some confusion going on. Common sense. And then to the sisters that say what they ain't doing. These sisters really get me. You know, when you having conversations with them, I ain't going for that. You cannot same time. That's impossible. Because if you're telling him you're not going for it, he's not listening to your mouth. He thinks it's historic that it runs. He's looking at your actions. So now, if you're not going for it, then step off. Well, then what about the conscious women? The women that have read all the books and striving to have the perfect family. Because, let me tell you something. What I never do is believe that I'm better than any other woman. See, because if you start to say, well, I'm conscious and the girl that you see and she's not conscious and why are you with her and you're not with me? See, every woman deserves love, every woman. And every woman has the potential to be conscious. All right? And what happens is he may like her for some other reasons going on. He may be teaching her to be conscious. But, you know, the conscious women, a lot of the brothers don't want to deal with the conscious women. And I'm moving into the men now. So all of y'all that got excited, it's your turn now. See, because the conscious woman presents you with a reality. If I say to you, I'm conscious, and I'm striving daily to increase my level of consciousness, and all I want to deal with is the truth, I can handle it. Now, every other female that you dealt with, you lied to. You know it. So now automatically you looking at me cross-eyed because you think I got something new going on here. So you say, wait a minute, she's telling me that I can tell her about how I feel about another sister. This is game. Nah, I'm not going to do that. And so then you start trying to game me. But I once told a brother that I, used to go out with, I said, the shortest distance between A and B is a straight line. A straight line. Why are you in the maze doing all of this? That ain't it. So now, if I'm strong and I'm conscious, don't get mad at me. You got to get stronger and get conscious. And now, so you can't, brothers, look at a woman that has her program together and now decide that because she has her program together, you can't deal with her because something's wrong with her. Something may indeed be wrong with you. And brothers, when I talk about a denial of racism and capitalism and war, that's real serious. You see, but black men are conscious of the war because the war is most direct on the black man. So now, once you become conscious of the war, though, brothers, you cannot run around trying to make a joke out of genocide because you know that the majority of black men are missing in action doesn't mean that you can try to dance on the graves of those brothers and destroy the black woman. Why would you have two women and treat them both bad? That. I could deal with it. You want to have another woman? Fine with me. Why is it fine with me? Sisters get uncomfortable. Why is it fine with me? Because Susan Taylor talked about self-love. I'm going to tell you, I am confident that I am intelligent and beautiful and productive. Therefore, I don't have to worry about the other woman. I hope every black woman's getting love as long as it's clean and it's decent. And she and I can be friends. But understand this. I don't believe this because I think this is how it should be. I don't. But I acknowledge that we're in a state of war. And when I look at the numbers, I say, oh my God. And when I feel lonely, I don't wish that on any other sister. And I have so much love in my heart for black people that I have even given up the selfishness that was naturally in somebody about a man. In action. Hey, there was a time when if your man was with another woman, you could say that that was one of the hot girls in the community. It's not like that anymore. See, because now what it is he has a choice of 5 or 10 women who are all productive and all fine and all intelligent and all educated. It's the truth. So, what man do you know is going to push them all away? I haven't met him. Two out of 2,000 is 1%. So what I'm saying, brothers and sisters, is that our relationships have got to be centered around honesty. Not just our male-female relationships, but also our political relationships. If you know there's a political official who's not being as strong as he should, you should constructively criticize him. Because in the absence of criticism and friction, we have no growth and development. And that person might make a misassessment and believe that he's doing all right. And in the interim, he may slip into the triple jeopardy and into the realm of fantasy, which may be destructive to you and me. And in racism and in capitalism, we have to always use the same yardstick. Understand that we have the power to bring a lot of pain or a lot of pleasure on one another. Every time that you destroy a black woman, every time that you destroy a black man, you are aiding and abetting in the destruction of African civilization. You might as well as be the white man. And closing, I'll tell you a little story. I had a discussion with a couple of the brothers over at the Nation of Islam. And we were talking about the book, and I was saying my main problem with the book is it's heavy-sided on one side, it doesn't analyze the other side, and it lacks historical clarity. Historical clarity in the sense that the black man and woman have always struggled together. Always. And if a black man is a war victim and is himself mentally devastated by the system, how can he now correct the black woman when he himself is not correct? What I would suggest is that you and your woman go see Dr. Mc Intosh. said to me, well, Lisa, you know, my parents, they had a good relationship other than the physical abuse. And I said, there is no such thing. There is no such thing. Because what makes you like the white man is when you enjoy a beneficial position in a society, predicated and founded on power and the access to power, and you use and abuse that position against somebody in a weaker position, then you are an oppressor. You are physically stronger than the black woman. Very few black women would debate that with you. So if you use your hands to express your anger, your frustration, history, racism, pain, then you are oppressing her because she has no way to respond to that. And I concluded the conversation by saying, my brother, Minister Louis Farrakhan, would certainly... my brother, Minister Louis Farrakhan, would certainly agree with me. And that was indeed the end of the conversation. But I would like to thank you. And I would like to beg you to be a soldier in the war, to use the same yardstick, to go home and be honest. It may cause some explosive reaction, but it is the beginning of cleansing yourself and your relationship and moving onward unto the eye of the enemy. Peace.